Monsters is also within the Growing collection, and it is probably, no, it is without a doubt one of the hardest stories I ever have written. And it wasn't just hard because it's a very hard subject to talk about with our kids, but it was hard because it was extremely emotional. I can still remember the night that I wrote this story. My daughter, I had already put her to bed. It was probably around 11 o'clock, and I was working on the Elle Grey stories and getting them ready. And my daughter had a cold that night. I remember keeping a close eye on her on the monitor. And I happened to put a movie on in the background as I was working, and the movie was called Room, and it's on Netflix. And the whole time it kept catching my eye, and I just kept thinking, this can never happen to my daughter. This can never, ever happen to my daughter. And if you're not familiar with the movie, it's about a young girl who's taken. She's kidnapped, she's tricked. A man approaches her and says, I need help. And being, this young woman that she was, and she was 17 years old in the story, she wanted to help. Because what do we do as parents? We teach our children to be kind and help, and so she was doing what she thought was right, not understanding that this man was tricking her. And he kept her captive for several years, and it was just a horrific story. And unfortunately, this is what happens in our world, and that was really emotional for me. And so at one point, after the movie had ended, my daughter had woken up at about 1 a.m. She was having trouble breathing, and I had gone into her room and I laid with her. And I got her back to sleep, but I decided to stay there with her because I was, concerned about her cold and making sure she could breathe. And I just kept watching her sleep, and I just kept thinking, I want you to always be able to be in your own bed. So as parents, of course, we know there are some very dangerous people in this world. But it's never an easy conversation to have with our kids. In fact, it's a very difficult conversation to have with our kids. But our kids are dealing even with online predators, online monsters. And that's a really scary thing for our kids, and it's really scary for us as parents. But it is a conversation we need to have. For me, I just decided that I would much rather have that conversation with her than leave her vulnerable in any way at all. And so that's really why I wrote the story Monsters, was to help her. But it was a really hard story to write because it's such a hard thing to talk about with our kids. So I knew I needed to be able to write it in such a way that it didn't leave her feeling scared. Of course, we don't want our kids scared of the world that they live in. And so, even though we know it can be pretty scary. And so, for me, it was really important that I write the story in such a way to really leave them feeling empowered, to really help them understand there are some tricks and some secrets that these monsters do that wouldn't it be great if our kids knew them, but those monsters didn't know that our kids knew them? So while those monsters may try to approach our child, our kids are ready. Our kids are prepared. Our kids know. Our kids know what's happening. And that's really what this story was for.
We've got